Bond's internal monologue and interactions at SIS headquarters. The painterly technique or art isn't the chief thing in killing bad men, Bond thought between half remembering the lines of Save Your Tears. He was in that half-stupor of a catnap. His feet were up on his desk when the call came in from Moneypenny, and stirred him to consciousness of his surroundings. A bit of nonsense floating through his head never bothered him. It didn't stop him killing men with dispatch. Spare Bond. Success as an assassin is about knowing that you are just. As the phone rang, he went on tracing in his inner theater or spectral vision the forms of the famous De Nachtwacht, better known to the plebs as the Night Watch. He saw vividly a black and a white figure clad in the finest of grand dress. Okay, maybe to Stockhausen. Bond thought something from the time after mechanized war had come in was needed here. He didn't want to just look at the figures, he wanted a soundtrack too. No, they don't do it like that anymore. No. Bond's thought was that of a Greek surrounded by a circle of Romans for whom the Roman way won't do, but in whom the sneaking spark of passionate love for the Roman ways was latent. For verily, he was tempted to negotiate an existence with the technological. One of the reasons Bond was fond of Neo Rauch was that Rauch couldn't pray, but he genuinely wanted to, whether he knew it or not. Rauch was like something trying to become sacred. Bond dismissed the Latini world with a bit of almost effete disdain for the beauties of his own age, as Pierre Clemente had dismissed Catherine Deneuve for a birthmark, which he immediately declared a repulsion for, in his tattered socks which he already had revealed preparing to make love, and from behind his metal jaw which derived from an arrogant criminal's warlike life, like that of Larry Fish's character in King of New York. Criminals have no care for the whole, they have no style. They're not real men, Bond thought, they're bitches. Killing happens in the commonplace which stands between the prayer and the sneer, where the cynicism below is beneath a deck of wood, where the shining grace above appears as the tedious clock of the galaxy turning upon the seasons. Daily life is neither. Daily life is sacred. Style in killing is measured by one standard. Did the killer have something to say? The only thing worth saying is this kill was just, the dead was a bad man, he's dead forever. This kill is an expression of eternal justice. A glowingly joyous fertility forever moves in its symbol. Not everyone can read it, but those who can are blessed. Give thanks, for you have witnessed a holy sigil in the path of your daily rounds. It will burn in your memory, warming your life. His own age didn't hold him in intimate embrace. It hooped him in a ring of boredom, neither drawing the insane screams of a small child whose mother can't calm it, nor touching his shoulder with the journeys of a Greek hero or a distant hand. At bottom even M left him cold. With her mining of the earth for technical resources in the fuel of world civilizations, stiff upper lip, as though he were Herder, who loved every other age but not his own with infinite affection, or some insane romantical German. But the fourth ring sounded as his thoughts spun back to reality, and he picked up the receiver. Right, Moneypenny, be right there. Bond's soul passed over the rather savage spear the man in white was toting in the painting as it flushed into the nothing of his memory, and he sped at a soldier's fine clip down the halls of SIS towards the special elevator that went up the north tower of SIS headquarters. The chilled atmosphere of the 9th floor of SIS acted like what the Americans called a skiff without windows and quiet. If it weren't for Ms. Moneypenny, it would have been very cold and elemental. The whole floor was only linked to the rest of the world by an old phone line. Bond stepped off the special elevator, which was totally isolated and under multiple systems of AI observation and containment, which M controlled along with Birdie, her chief. Bond thought M kept an incinerator in a special corner of the floor beyond her private WC to dispose of human beings in certain cases, though he wasn't entirely sure how it was set up. He shouldn't have entirely wondered if the truth were that the engineers had themselves been incinerated after the unit was installed. He never let his moribund suspicions show, but preferred nonchalance and even juvenile deflections like a 12-year-old girl laughing when the horse's head appeared in the bed in the famous scene of Godfather in order to suppress or deflect the horror. Seduction was dancing to the music and rolling with the punches was proficiency in the field, but the heights of power always disagreed with Bond. In fact, his own vision differed from M and her chief Birdie. In ancient Greece, synousia meant literally being together, fucking. It early on became the word for philosophic conversation. It implies intimacy, which is always accompanied, when brought into public, by the feeling of pride at having the lust-producing other that lovers feel in the face of the public. Thus, Plato's problem. How can everyone be superior? For pride is nothing but feeling oneself superior, instead of the family against the whole. Pride saw a diminution of its annual income under the priests. In America, it surged under the name democratic societies. Black pride. The ballot or the bullet. As he came in, Moneypenny turned away from her monitor and her QWERTY keyboard. Like a little girl of 10, out with a friend at a pub, and no adults, in a skirt and a flapper's knit hat, according to her mother's taste, with a navy blue band of cloth, who leaves a green laminated wallet with a frog face cartoon on the face of it to go get a fresh fruit cup from a cafe counter. Moneypenny Bond, she's in a brash fluster today, you better go right in. And Moneypenny flicked her right shoulder playfully in the direction of the green-lit door to M's office. Moneypenny was likely the only one who knew how many M had killed at close quarters. Bertie hadn't always been M's chief, there had been others. And M had forgotten after 100. No record was kept. Bond? Oh, Moneypenny. Is that you? I thought it was an angel? Well, no time to chat, king and country, you know. And he shot her a look full of charisma. Yet somehow as he passed through the door without hearing Moneypenny say, "James, what do you think about I and you being next to each other on this keyboard?" No doubt she had said something droll. His mind was rattled since the Egypt thing was drifting in an attitude of preoccupation with the whole business. His mind and his ass. He was banged up 10 ways to Tuesday, and properly he couldn't imagine why M was having it. Usually in such a condition, a 0-0 was bound to take time off to recuperate. Bond, I thought of that for a split second one time in Egypt, but I don't kill like that. The corners of his mouth were slightly tensed. He wasn't angry. He was almost proud. The kill he was observing in his mind's eye as he came into M's presence was with a triple entry, man gone right up to the target, point-blank rage. He liked the sound of it, triple entry, sounded like a pale woman all oiled up doing a strip tease for his eyes only, licking her finger, inserting it. All 3 of the entries, though, had been like little fingers digging in the dead man's heart. M. Bond, stop daydreaming and pay attention! M barked in a way calculated to make the swagger on Bond's face run for cover. He came to himself in the midst of her office and saw her pointing to the figures on the screen. M. The Western world is teetering on the edge of destruction. The Five Eyes intelligence sharing network is compromised. With Trump with his clown's red nose in the White House, we can't be sure any information provided won't go right to Moscow. Bond, you're to keep your nose clean. I don't want you picked up by the American police on any account. You know what that means. Your contact man is Leiter, Felix Leiter. We're establishing a new circle firm outside the public eye. PM would never see M's war book. William Bertie, M's chief, was the only one she trusted with it. He was her J. Edgar. She was his Nixon. They got on like smoke. The pestiferous thing was even Bond didn't know how the bloody omelet was made. And he liked eggs. A good mousseline sauce with them from Maxim's didn't hurt either. M gave out on a need-to-know basis only what tasted like the appropriate kibble. The wolf feeding the dog. Canine to canine. That was supposed to be enough. Of course, he was a clever chap and could infer quite a bit about the overall plan from scraps he got, but something troublesomely eluded him. Bond, yes, I read that last bit about meeting up with Felix Leiter in the file, ma'am. Good man. That's fine. While I have you here 007, let me probe on this Georgia business. The bloody Americans are pressuring us on the Georgia election. What do you know about Georgia Bond? Bond European data focusing on the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Area, DCFTA agreement, shows Georgia is losing out in trade balance with the agreement. The EU has imposed 58 trade restrictions on Georgia since 2021, on the justification that Georgia is a conduit for Russian goods, mum. Damnable coup. They want to elect their own man. Never mind, let's get on with the briefing for your mission, Bond. Seduction is letting lust find a track through manners. That was Bond's definition when he first went up to Cambridge. But later he discovered the methods of bursting through manners are invariably linked quibbles of circumstance and individuality. And no one is so much themselves as to be insusceptible to being smelled out as a dog smells out every bitch. The rhizome clusters of blue veins which Bond knew to be on M's ancient pasty white thighs didn't embarrass him. Thinking of a bit of saliva on them didn't trouble him. Old women flared up with lust, thinking that a cock still responded to them, blushed, laughed same as the young ones, nor did it repulse him. It was a deft method his muscles had always drawn him to in laughter. He came to the gold avenue of invasion. The art of seduction is impossible for egotists. One couldn't really be there. One had to have the attitude of a surfer on the high waves who achieves the kind of nirvana adventure that Timothy Leary had got in Spain or Mexico or someplace years ago. The closer one was to non-being, the more intense was the power of lust, which had nothing to do with looks or conventional trappings. Hot histories and destinies always live in the tedious normalcy of daily doing, fire catching fire on fire, lust which opposes the tedious married life of men who find sex flavorless, and women who use their husbands as masturbatory props. He saw in his visionary's glance that he could have the haggard hound dog old M lustily barking, "Bond! Take my stockings off. That's right, take them off altogether. Take them off and then I'll kneel down and you'll take me like a dog." Or if need be, once the idea he was all she wanted had grown deep in her, looking wistfully, "James, now that I have you, why should I let you go? This mission is too dangerous. Stay here, darling, and you're not in good health now." For Bond, seduction was about inviting lust in, and it was always waiting to awaken. It was an attitude. It was the mood of hypnosis by the flashing out of mutual reverberations, and the pliant holding still which commanded action of the shy woman, or the studied normative advances of the dominating woman for whom there was nothing but sex, or the lusty eyes on his prick and ass flashing of a brash one. The visible M started talking. The 007 machine turned on, affecting nonchalance to keep up appearances as he honed in carefully to the screen and pricked his ears up for the really vital details of the mission. His eidetic memory started clicking snapshots. His spycraft was getting a morning stretch, his masculine charisma was doing extremely well. M. Griffith White, look at him. A man cursed him outside of a used bookshop in Washington, D.C. last week, and he had his henchman rip his tongue out. The man died shortly after from his wounds. Bond, poor chap. You wouldn't have me done like that, Mom. I mean, if you ordered me killed, you'd make it painless? The whim to do so could come upon me ex abrupto. And she whipped around and stared at his smirking cheeks. It was like a hurricane. He was actually shocked, though he kept up his manful, poised stance. And the matter need not concern you now, 007. Let's collect ourselves. We have a series of genetic switches which built a giant of a man. The medical concern behind it is a Wanax group operating outside the nucleus of any recognized power. A certain Dr. Boyko, you had Russian at Cambridge, didn't you, Bond? Is his chief designer. The aim, we believe, was to restore a really vigorous Bronze Age gene line. They succeeded. The details remain unclear. They're damn good, and they've got a lot of money, Bond. Online organ trade. They ship all over like Jeff Bezos, she said with exasperation, almost as though she were hoping that she could collapse into Commander James Bond's arms. The traits are those of a Mycenaean Wanax dynasty. Now I know that he looks like Daniel Lambert Bond. Lambert killed a bear in a fight. Bond reflected that lava was coming out of M like a piece of ripe Gruyere. He tried to remain unceremoniously casual about it. Bond, lucky I'm not a bear. I suppose, Mom, it's a good thing we're not dealing with a transgender black Wanax giant. Or something properly scary. Bond reflected mechanically on possible scenarios where turning her out would serve a dialectical advantage. Never can tell when a hard reboot of the UK Secret Service might be necessary. Putin running rampant in the East, Trump disrupting the core of the financial system at Washington. He popped off a schoolboy witticism about the Eighth Wonder as a reference to Griffith White, the fat man who was rocked in the cradle of Wanax Group, who had the gods of Wanax Group sing over him when he was an infant, whose mother tongue was Wanax Group. Wanax Group has convinced itself that we have nothing on them. They think we're distracted by American wanking and British righteousness and by Putin. They're more vulnerable now than they'll ever be, Bond. I can smell it. I know I can count on you. The stakes have never been higher. The PM is distracted with some little ideological stuff. He wants me to aid in swinging the elections of this tiny little country of 3.7 million Georgia. Well, it's of some strategic importance, as you'll know, but really I don't have the manpower. It's a distraction from responsible intelligence work. It's an order come down from the Americans. Let's be on the ball as the politicians are failing us all. For a second, Bond rather thought he'd make sure he still had it. Why do you have that bloody silly look on your face, Bond? Bond, I have the pleasure of seeing my beautiful superior so seldom. The way he said it somehow rang in the ear and stirred the organism. It was without guile, as though said by human matter-of-factness without purpose. The fire has to start if the water is to boil, even if with the most anodyne tinder. M registered a clinched wince of embarrassment and pretended not to have heard the remark, to which she preferred to give no thought. As one does with fools who make some slip in etiquette like some countrified lout using do when they ought to have said sigh. Bond, you're in good hands, Mum, Bond said firmly. reverting adroitly to the thread about his being better than a politician, though not from embarrassment at his blunder, but only to suppress the immediate beginning of a dance, and let the unconscious suspend itself in a dream, as if not quite knowing how to take her shut down and feeling a tad phased, observing the ferociousness of the old bird's defenses, as if realizing whatever she was really thinking she only shared with Bertie. Realizing his experience with women of her age was less than with other demographics, he applied his powers of observation more diligently than usual. Now 007, you'll travel under the name Boris Black. A British-Canadian Trumpian loyalist selling drill bits. Bloody Yanks 007 Bond. Yes, Mum, you'll find the file in your office inbox. Bond drill, baby, drill, Mum. She studiously ignored the remark like a polite diplomat at a state function, and his lips went cold. You'll have to pick up the trail in Washington. Nobody knows where Griffith White has got to. Because of the injuries he had sustained in Egypt, Bond again reflected, it was almost shocking that M was putting him back in the field so rapidly. What was up? The PM desperate over the shot at this little window on Wanax Group's Achilles heel? Or had Elon Musk put in a call from the White House and she was just bluffing? He thought of pumping M's chief of staff for info, but decided against it as he didn't wholly trust Bertie. Bond wasn't like typical intelligence officer poofters with their romantic and beautiful ideas about the service, nor did he sweat on the job happily because he knew the money bought good prostitutes in exotic and shithole, which is to say low-income countries, or because they wanted a second house in the countryside more than they wanted to kill bad men. He almost always sparked with women. The unique elegance in his flat's layout was enough for him. An occasional low-profile trip to one of the better London clubs for a saucy meal was an easy score of pleasure, and saving up for retirement never crossed his mind. His old Scottish maid was loyal to a fault. His dedication, his love, what he lived for was the art of killing bad hombres. Well, his ideas were hardly different then when he had been at school. But what of it? And if the damnable old devil gave him a mission, it was all to the good. For the 100th time, M employed the big threat as tyranny by other means, and accordingly tediously repeated that she might revoke his license to kill. That if revoked, no notice would be given. That it may have been revoked and reinstated in the past, and that he may already be guilty of murders. Then Bond left with more of a seaman's than of a soldier, sure-footed but free-bound out of M's office. After snatching up the file from Moneypenny's fingertips with a whispered word of camaraderie, if it hadn't been for Moneypenny, Bond would have been the blackest of black sheep at SIS. He made way out of the big green-lit monster and hit the street. Let the tech branch bother about it all. Bond wasn't worried about the profile they set up for the Boris Black identity, web page and family photos. He felt high as a kite shook and stretched by the wind in the chamber where no shadows fell over the great metropole in the glint of the 11 a.m. sun. Though the reason really escaped him, he was happy. It must have been because he was on a job. There's little Bond could stand less than the boring tedium of downtime. He reflected not from spite but from prudence how he could clap the Skinner box on a malfunctioning old bitch. But there was no cause to control the environment just yet, he reflected for the 100th time. He saw her looking at his zipper lustfully, or during sex ejaculating some phrase like, "You're a freak, Commander." He observed the permutations of a spectral vision of the high-flying, lovelorn M he had successfully shut down and infiltrated, bossed out all her codes. Got 00 branch doing it his way, but for now, he put that away as a potential emergency measure not yet reached its time. M was still holding it down respectably to his way of thinking. He didn't do things just to flex, or to show his powers. The chief principle of a 00 is vincit qui se vincit. The triple hit in the heart had been a solid and beloved mufti. The scene flashed up in the place of M. He was a large man. His body was on the Sea Island polished marble floor of a magnificent mosque which had stood beside an ominous neo-Mamluk structure which cast a shadow over the floor. Bond had thought it a whimsical way to make a kill. "No, I don't kill like that," he thought almost proudly. But who would have even thought of it? It wasn't the act of a mere sadist, it was stylish after a fashion. Now he was convinced it was Eighth Wonder, who he gave the moniker 8. So, 8, you're a pro-killer, an artiste. He chuckled gaily. He thought, though really deep down admiring 8, that it wasn't so stupid a way to kill a man. The heart is unrepairable, there can't be a recovery. It's a genuine kill all right, done on a principle with some thought put into it. Bond's thoughts deep under the helmet he wore when he revved up the engine on his Kawasaki 600 Enduro as he sped down the roads of His Majesty's realms. The streets of London were bustling and gravid with their usual high banality, as though a nuclear weapon were blasting in a mushroom cloud. They give birth to woozy and frothed drinkers like Nigel Farage in the dining places at lunch in the shapes of the smoke pumping up into the mushroom. The grace in the awe-inspiring blast was the divorce proceedings and the selling of underpants to old people. Bond wasn't so romantic as to think ever marriage in London ended eventually in the couple not being able to stand one another. It wasn't until he glided down on the tarmac in D.C. without a weapon that he fully broke from his profound meditations which were tinged with terrors too abstract to speak.